He's a fly fishing pro at the Franklin Club. He's a fly fishing international certified instructor. And when I met Ian, he was the first person to teach me to fish on a fly rod. On top of that, they were the 2016 Commonwealth Gold Champions. Is that correct, Ian?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And in 2018 was silver.
Mm-hmm.
And you placed 8th overall?
Yeah, probably something like that.
2000. I read the stats.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've attended every session Ian has, and it's just been an actual wonderful experience for me, because I never held a fly rod in my hand before, and within 20 minutes to half an hour, he had me up and going, and he's utterly changed my life, honestly, because he's one of the people who helped me get my certification, along with the great Bill Spicer and Sheldon Seal. But I consider Ian my mentor and one of my friends. So without further ado, and by the way, his company is called Into the Backing.
Yeah.
That's the website, right?
April Volke's been using that name, so I'm gonna sue her for copyright infringement or something like that.
100%.
Yeah. But all right, so, thanks everybody. And
yeah,
is that Ron? Ron, I see. Maeda, is that Ron? I haven't seen Ron in years. Can see the top of your head, Ron. So yeah, today, I mean, thanks for having me, and I'm here for the next couple of hours, or as long as until you guys get tired of me, you guys can just hang up. And really, it's a little dated because I know we're kind of heading into steelhead season, but I still wanted to do what we were originally planning to do earlier this year, which was, guide flies, and, I like to add how to fish them. And I thought this would be a good time I was joking with people, but not really a joke. I'm running out of flies here, so I need some for the credit tomorrow and the grand later today. So I thought I'd tie a couple and just talk and tie. I'd much rather have a two-way conversation, so interrupt me a lot if you'd rather ask questions at the end. And a couple things some of you know, my former mentor, Ian Colin James. So I had the luxury of being, he gave me kind of guiding mentorship for 10, 15 years. You'll see a lot of, if you knew him, a lot of similarities that I kind of have that no nonsense basic flies. So I probably guarantee everybody here is a better fly tyer than me. My flies are pretty simple. So when I think of guide flies, I'm on Team Canada and fish all over the world. I use the same flies guiding. I fished at the World Championships in Tasmania before COVID this year. They're trout. They have very similar food items. I like to think of flies as ammunition. So I enjoy, like, if you enjoy fly tying, there's beautiful flies. I never want to be afraid of losing a fly. So you'll find out, these are simple, fast. You're more willing to put a fly, into those rocks, under that bush, if you don't care about losing it. If I spend a lot of time and I have a couple flies like that, you just have that inkling, do I really want to lose this fly? So my flies are cheap, effective, and I'll talk a little bit, because I think when it comes to flies and how to fish them, people don't spend enough time on how the fly behaves. We get hung up on, the wrong shade of olive or the wrong wombat's ass feather. I don't think they have feathers. But I'll talk more about sink rate and, how it moves, and then feel free to interrupt me, because I can just kind of tie and talk the whole time. So I'm really going to go through kind of I've got my top 4 nymphs here, my top 4 dries. We get through it all great, and one streamer. And I would say on the Grand this year, this streamer, now again, I fish these flies more, so obviously it worked more for me, because I do find I catch more fish with the flies I have in the water than the ones in the box. But this fly, that streamer pattern, has outfished pretty much everything on the Grand. And those who were just talking, fished the upper Grand. It was pretty tough this year. I think stocking was a little early with the cold, and there's people talking about predation. There were some areas where we found the stockies, and you could have a 50 fish day, but that was just, you found where they were. They were very, very, just very certain spots of the river. But this year was interesting. I was talking to Rob Heel about it quite a bit, is we caught more big fish than we ever had, like easily with like never have I caught this many big fish with clients. Everyone on one of the flies I'm going to tie today. But we're really concerned about that kind of middle. I did not personally catch a lot of fish between that, call that 14, 16 inch range. They're either like 20-inch beasts plus, or little tiny dinkers. But the middle Grand, where I am later this week, has been fishing better, and it's getting prime now, and you get those resonant rainbows and stuff like that. So these will work on the credit, kind of anywhere you go. So let's get started, and I'll get going. So So feel free to roll your eyes at how simple these flies will be, but let's start with the first one. So I won't tie the actual original. You've all heard of a zebra midge, but if I could pick one fly, I'm going to say that 3 times. Okay, one of 3 flies. And if I said I could pick one of them to fish the Grand, would be this zebra midge modified version. So those who don't know a zebra midge, it's a midge imitation. It's just black thread with a silver rib. The original with a silver bead. The original is great, but this variation I find really works well on the Grand, which is like this tea-colored water. And what I found interesting is when I fished in Northern Ireland in one of the Commonwealth Championships and in England, their streams look very similar to the Grand. Like it feels like home. And they found anything with a little bit of a hot spot on it in that kind of tea-colored water worked really, really well. And silver beads tend to work in that kind of water. So when you go into the Grand, a silver beaded fly, not always, like to take a Joe Humphreys line, 2 words to take out of your vocabulary is always and never. But there's a good bet. This is one of the first ones I'll tie on, especially if it's a little bit of a cloudy day, not one of those bright sunny days. So this is the modification I really like. So this would be in sizes 14 down to 18. I don't tie these very, very big. It is a midge, but I feel very comfortable throwing a 14 at any fish. So I actually, you'll see, use, some people like jig hooks a lot. I did like jig hooks a lot. I spent a lot of time with the Spanish team, probably the best river anglers in the world, and they were really big on taking a slotted bead and then tying it by angling your thread like this. It works just like a jig hook, as you can see that ball of that, if you can see that, maybe I'll do that. If you can see that, there's just it sits just up on top of the hook. The reason I do that is it gives a little bit of a hook gape. A jig hook would come down and kind of block the hook. This will still invert the fly, but give you more space between the hook point and the hook eye. And so on smaller flies, 14s, 16s, 18s, I tend to more just tie it like this. You don't have to do that. It just, I don't lose as many flies. So it's really a thread body, silver wire. Feel free to riddle me with questions as I try to find at any point. Okay, so silver wire, thin silver wire. I wouldn't go overboard on the thickness of the wire, so I'm just going to tie in, if I can actually see it, a thin silver wire. Nothing fancy there. So, and the original zebra midge, a lot of people take them way down around the hook. I just tie it right to the bend of the hook. So what I found makes a big difference here, as I talked about, is putting a hot spot on it. So I'm using what's called Glow Bright number 5. It looks just like the hot orange thread. You can see it's hot orange thread. Also, for those who do steelhead fishing, that Alaskan roe color in glow bug yarn, that color works really, really well. So I'm just going to take this, fold it over again, and spin it. So I get this little, right there. Just a little, I'm going to put a little tail on it. So very similar to if you're doing a red tag, if you know what that is, or anything along those lines. So I'll take my end, just put it over the body. So I've got my wire tied in. Got my wire tied in, is in the way. Put it over the body. I put it the length of the body just to make it even. I'm just gonna, and now you want to do your touching turns down the hook. This is the body now, and back up to the top. The one thing I would say is to cut this hot spot pretty short. I wouldn't leave a super long tail, so I go right at the bend of the hook, and I trim it like that. So you can probably see, hopefully, I don't know if you guys can see, because I know my screen's smaller, a little small tail hot spot on that. Just rib your fly up. And that is it. So that fly right there easily takes the most fish for me on the Grand. I've taken some of my most, there's one other fly that I take all my big fish with. This would be the first one if I get to the Grand and it's a cloud in the sky, it's a little bit dark in any way, shape, or form. I'd fish that comfortably all day. And so it just looks like that.
Are you Euro-nymphing with that?
So I do mainly Euro-nymphing. You could fish this under an indicator, do whatever you want with it. But I fish a very, very thin Euro-nymphing rig. So for those who, from a Euro rig perspective, I get a lot of attention these days. I find it's a lot of people are fishing like maybe like 5-10 years ago with a lot of heavy, call it Maxima and stuff along those lines. What I don't like about that is it causes a big sag. So you think if I'm nymphing and I have a, think of me at a fishing, like a fly line, I can't bend my hand the right way, and my nymph's down here, that sag is going to always pull my nymph off the bottom. So by having, and the farther away I fish, the more sag there is. So I fish very, very thin diameter, so 0.14 millimeter, which is like 5x. So my leader is 5x, and then I fish very rarely do I fish over 7x on the Grand, and that's also because the diameter of the tippet. It's not about them seeing the tippet. It's the diameter of the tippet cutting in the water will also not get my nymph down. So I fish pretty light beads. It's usually one fly. My fly gains the bottom right away, and I find when I take clients out, it blows their minds because when they take away that sag, now it is a bit of a style to get used to casting that, and you need the right rod for it. But once you get used to taking that sag out, you can put the tiniest nymph on the bottom. Because if you think about it and take your lightest beaded fly, go to the river and drop it at your feet, it goes right to your feet. I don't care how fast the water is, it lands at your feet. The only reason you get drag on a fly is because you've attached a piece of tippet to it. And the thicker the tippet, the more the water pushes on it, the more it raises it up. And especially when I use indicators, because I will float indicators, I'm ultra sensitive on making that thin. Because, if you think about it, here's the bottom of my screen is the bottom of the river. There's boulders down here. That's going to cause a cushion. We all know the cushion. There's also a cushion at the side. Now we're on the side of the river. But this middle piece is fast. So if you're putting a tapered leader for sure, but anything of any diameter that's thick, that middle piece of the water is going to catch all that tippet, and it's going to pull it off the bottom again. So I want the least amount of resistance. And before, a lot of times I'll change weight of a fly. I'll change tippet diameter just to sink. And I tell you, practice it yourself. Try 6x, go 5x, 6x, 7x with the same fly in a faster piece of water, and you'll be amazed at how the difference it will make.
And you always use fluoro line rather than mono?
Fluoro I use for nymphing, and then I use copolymer for dries. Because fluoro sinks. It's more abrasion resistance. I find, I've used copolymer as well for nymphs. It doesn't really, I don't lose any sleep over it, but I tend to like fluorocarbon a little bit better.
And do you tend to use a lighter rod, a 3x rather than a 5x?
I use a 2-weight, 10'6" 2-weight, if you want it. And then for my dry fly, I use a 4-weight rod with a 2-weight line.
And Ian, do you ever have trouble, like that 7x tippet is pretty skinny? Do you have to, like, if you get something real on there, you have to protect it pretty good?
No, not really. And so that comes with the rod though, right? So if I'm not like, so again, it's designed for that. It's got a good butt section, but it's very soft in the tip. If you actually hook that up, I do it with people all the time, hook that up with a soft rod and try to break it. It doesn't break very easy. You break off the odd.
Yeah.
I would very rarely break them off, and I don't agree with that soft rods take longer to land a fish. I actually think it's how you hold the rod angle. If you keep it low and keep the fish back in that low water versus kind of bouncing up into that fast water, they come in pretty quick. Like we were fishing, the only time we really had to beef up the tippet was we got pulled back for COVID. We were in New Zealand for the Commonwealth Championships just in March, and our coach is from Spain, and he's a light tippet guy, but the fish were all so big and the water was so fast. So they were all like steelhead. Everyone felt like a steelhead. Like every fish is 28 plus inches, wild. They're easy to catch, like ridiculously easy, but you couldn't even get them in. So we had to go to 5x. That's the one time I went to 5x, but we found sticking the rod in the water right down and then stripping them in which Ian James taught me like 15 years ago, they came right into the net. So we spent a lot of time. How do you land a fish in water? You can like that. Picture that. Like we had kayaks going by us and rafting tours. Like that's the speed of the water. So they were just, that was the one time I would say we said, okay, 7X is stupid. We can't actually turn them. They're getting downstream of us too much. But we really had to crank the weight up of our flies. And we did, like, it was amazing how much more weight we had to put in them to get them down. So we had to retie all our flies because you couldn't get them down.
Can you keep the drag really light?
What's that?
You keep the drag really light. You don't have any drag on your line at all.
Yeah, it's pretty light. Yeah, and I actually don't, very, very rarely will have them take all the line, but I use a like an Italian automatic reel called a Vivarelli, and they have like, so to me it's faster to do this. It's a trigger reel. So this, I don't want to take my hand away to do it. If I'm nymphing and casting out and I need to bring in line, I just trigger it so it can bring in slack. So those have very, very light, like non-existent drag almost. So if you get on that, they're going to go. So you actually have to kind of slow them down a little bit. But I would tell you with that soft rod, if it's more about keeping the fish above you. All bad things happen when a fish gets below you. So when I'm teaching someone, moving your feet a bit and keeping a rod angle and the fish above you with low side pressure, most big fish come in. Like, I mean, we had the one I posted, it must have been, we landed a brown with a claw. Like he had Euro nymphs, but we really got into the light stuff, and it was about a 27-inch brown, and he put that in pretty easily. By keeping that low rod for how big the fish was. It was around Tombstone and it didn't want to leave the pool, so it just kind of kept swimming around there. But he got side pressure on it and got it in. Now, that's with a guide running around chasing it with the net, but there's those odd situations. But find your balance. 6X is pretty good. 5X, they better be big. Like I don't go up, like if I'm nymphing for steelhead, 5X, but other than that, I very rarely put it on. Dry flies, kind of the same, but copolymer.
What the tippet do you use again?
What brand?
Yeah.
So I use like our David Arkai. It's called Arkai tippet. So it's out of Spain. I think I know Smart Angling has it. I work with David on quite a few things, but other ones, I like Frog's Hair a lot for sure. Frog's Hair is just really, really expensive. Rio's okay. I find they're not as accurate on their diameters as I'd like. So we take the micrometers. And so Cortland and Rio tend to say, we've got the thinnest, strongest tippet. Well, your tippet's just really, really thick. So I'm very concerned about more how thin it actually is. But those ones are, if I had to use, like if I use an American, I think it's an American brand, I use Frog Hair if I have a choice. Arkai I like, but it's not expensive. It's 100, I think it's a 100-meter spool, 150-meter spool of tippet for $30. That's not bad for high performing tippet. So
I'm glad you mentioned that because I thought I was going insane at Ball Sheldon about a month ago because I actually ran out and bought a micrometer from Princess Auto and was checking the tippet.
Yeah, you're insane, but that's okay.
Okay.
That's okay. So
Could I ask first, could you hold up before you go to the next slide? Could you hold it up with a light background so we can see it? A little better.
Wait, hold on. We have the technology. We can do it. We can do it.
There you go.
I don't know. I don't even know if that shows up. That's pretty hard to see, isn't it?
Yeah. How about if you have a chance afterwards or any couple of days, just take a photo of it.
Yeah, I'll take pictures of these and send them to you. But there, maybe if I do that though. Oh, where's the camera?
Oh yeah.
But what do you see first? The little tag, right? It's just a zebra midge with a tag on the end. Look up zebra midge, put a tag on the end. But
okay.
So what I like about that fly is it doesn't, you can see there's no hackle on it, no rubber legs. That sinks really, really quickly. And man, if you get into that tea-colored water, it should click in your head. So try this. They work. These are why they come really. It really is an Irish style fly. They use them all over the place, and I mean everywhere you go, it looks like the Grand River.
Yep. Now, what size is that one? Is that the 18?
That's a 14. That's the biggest I would tie. I'm just trying to tie it so you guys can see it. There we go. If I do that kind of stuff, you can see.
Yep. How small would you go?
18.
18. Okay.
Yeah, 20. you know, here's what I do when I get into a size 8. Here's my Joe's on here. I think, is he still here? Did he leave? Joe's there. I can see him. This is like somewhere Ian James is rolling in his grave, yelling at me not to show you this fly, but that's okay. This was our favorite guide pattern. When the Grand got tough, or you ever get into tough conditions, it's this one. So either, I mean, choose your favorite bead, but I like either a black bead or a gunmetal bead, because this is where we're really imitating something small. It's I put it on a size 16 hook. You could go 18 if you want, but you can see I just put a bead on a hook.
Yep.
I like this dubbing a lot. Hare's ear plus number 1. It's the only reason I like it so much is it's a little bit got a Gary LaFontaine spin to it. It's got some Antron mixed into it, and I like a little bit of light Antron. Like I think Gary LaFontaine was onto it with that piece. It's just got that little bit of Antron. Normal hare's ear is just fine. I also will mix it with a little bit of fox squirrel. You can see there, just to make it spiky. But so do not put any thread down the hook. Just put the bead in. Take dubbing, dub behind the bead, like that. Finish your fly. Go slay fish anywhere in the world. So if I get into small stuff, anytime I get into anything small, I'll brush that out a bit, make it look special for everybody. Nothing will outfish that. Where is it? Where's my... Oops, where's the camera? Yeah, just hare's ear with a little bit of Antron behind a bead. So that'll be about a size 20 or a size 22 from a fish's. There you go. From a fish's perspective, looks like a clump of midges. Looks like a clump of anything. If you know there's fish in front of you on the Grand and they're eating all small stuff, they're eating tricos or all that kind of crap, just put that on. Like that saves the day all the time. So I like, to me, that's like people laugh because they know that fly. That's one of my favorites. I also have a dry fly where I just tie the like a caddis fly where I just put a wing on it. No, just the hook with a wing, and that's a really good one too. But so I call that a no-see-em. That would be another one of the ones I was going to tie today. So there you go. And then in the spirit of things, this has taken more fish for me easily on the Grand. Took that big fish, took most of them. There's 2 versions of a Walt's worm. I like it in a 14, pretty good, 14, 16. You know, if you think about what the fish on the Grand are, especially the upper Grand, they see a ton of isopods all year, potato bug or, you know, scud or whatever you want to call it. This looks like just food. Like I really firmly believe trout just think food, not food. They're very binary about the whole thing. I know we project a lot of romanticism onto it to make ourselves feel better. There are times when they're very, very dialed in on a specific food source, but I think that's very rare. This, as a general pattern to go, like, you know, that one I just showed you and this, if I could fish 2 flies for the rest of my life, these are the 2. And then right behind it is a pheasant tail. But this one, does very, very well. There's something about the pink bead, and I know you think the pink bead's going to be really, really kind of silly, but it's not. It's not the electric pink. So this is, I'm talking about the light pink. The light pink bead and brown trout, I don't know. They seem to get along really, really well, and rainbows aren't too far behind. But this pattern, I used to tie a fancier version. And this would be one of Team Canada's go-to flies for sure. You'll see it's very, very complex. So I'm going to tie just a Walt's worm. What I do is I've mixed that hare's ear dubbing 1 with that little bit of fox squirrel. Again, you don't have to overthink it. If you got some hare's ear, just use it. Just make sure you got a little bit of spikiness in it. I used to put a rib on it. I took it off. Doesn't make any difference. And so all I do though is, what I say is keep it tight at the start and then just get a little bit of a taper in it. Like that. And that bad boy is it's like an extended version of my last fly. That thing, oh, like that would be right there, but it's the pink bead. So that fly right there, you can see that, just a pink bead Walt's worm, no rib, deadly. I mean, you can tie, you see how fast I tied that? Tie 20 of them, you don't care if you put that in a tree, put it in your face, put it on the bottom. But I guarantee you, trout will eat that. That really, whoops. So there you go. So I'll tell you my one big, so we was fishing in Tasmania at the World Championships, and it was, Tasmania was interesting as the brown trout, like the rivers there have very low density of fish. So what we get in competitions are called beats, and that, so you get a section of river assigned to you. On like the Blue River in Colorado, they're as short as 50 meters because there's trout, like you can just keep catching trout all the time. We had the worst section of the river because it was such a low density of fish that my beat was 1.5 kilometers. Like that's ridiculous. So I have 3 hours to fish 1.5 kilometers. Before that, the best river angler in the world from Spain had fished it, and he got 3 fish, 3 little dinkers. So my spirits were not high. And so the Australian team that had been in first and had slipped dramatically because the French and the Spanish kind of win all the time, he was beneath me, being coached by former world champion to how to fish his stretch of the water. I knew that Jordi Oliveira is his name, had fished the river before me. I knew that what he would do from a Spanish perspective because we have Spanish coaches. So I went to I tell you right now, I thought Grand River. I looked at it and I'm like, okay, it's got a light bottom. I'm taking 1 fly, not 2. I'll just go with a size 14 pink bead Walt's worm, and I'm just gonna walk up this stupid river and put that fly everywhere I could. So, you know, first hour, no fish, you know, relax yourself, stay chill. I put this in a little divot, just like you would in the Grand, you know, like it's thin and there's that little bit of darker water, like the size of maybe 2 basketballs. And I thought I hooked bottom, monster, 7X for those who are asking. So I was little paranoid, so I just chased the fish into the corner, chased it to the bank and scooped it up. But when it turned out to be the largest fish caught in that entire section. I mean, the controller guy's hugging me. We all had to calm down. There's snakes around, and we're not supposed to do that. Went up the river, caught 2 more on that fly. Ended up beating the top guy from Spain. He came to me, asked me what he did. And I truly believe I just stuck with a fly that a fish is going to eat it. We had never used it in practice. In my head, I went, a brown trout will eat a pink bead Walt's worm all day long. Just fish it and just have confidence in it. And so the story would be, if you have flies, you have confidence in it. You can sometimes overthink it. It was getting pretty tough not to overthink it there, but that renewed or just kept my faith in that fly right there, just dubbing on a hook with a pink bead. But if you put the other beads, they're okay. Pink bead is the way to go. But 2 different things about these flies. These sink completely differently. This has all kinds of dubbing on it, right? This is ultra streamlined. This drifts slower than that. This, while they both will catch bottom and drift nice and slow, this still catches more water. Mop flies do really well. You know, with the fly, you just tie a piece of a mop on it because it also drifts slower. So in colder conditions, or when the fish are really off, I tend to go to actually flies with less movement. But people think, oh, I'm going to put a fly with a lot of movement in, a lot of dubbing. I actually go to a fly that's going to drift slower, which means it's just thread on a hook. And one more of my, these are my river flies. You may have heard of it. It's called a pheasant tail.
I have a quick question, Ian. Just, it's interesting you said that some of the best river fishers are in Spain. What's your take on that? I mean, you.
Oh, so Spain and France, the 3 top countries for fly fishing, without any doubt, internationally, are the Czech Republic, France, and Spain. From the last, I don't know, whatever world championships, last 10, they are almost always on the podium. It really now has become almost, if it's high fast water, the Czechs will probably win. If it's in any way lower skinny tough water, battle royal between the French and the Spanish. The first way is their ability to fish at distance. So they can nymph extremely far away. Remember I talked about that thin leader? The more distance you put between yourself and the nymph, the more sag you get. They're also able to put very, very small flies right on the bottom. And that's by using that light tippet and all that, taking all that weight out of the system. And they are masters of the dry fly. Like, so they fit. We'd be here, I would not do it justice to try to explain it, but they fish about 18, 20-foot leaders. And so so if you think about where you don't catch fish on a dry fly, a lot of times actually you spook the fish, either picking your line up, so there's a lot of line spray, or getting micro drag, and we hear about it all the time, but you know, their ability to fish complex currents with a custom-made leader, they're very into their custom-made leaders. I had the 3-time world champion fish the Grand with me. His name's David Archive, that's the tippet. He was showing me how to drift a fly. They take kind of cedar run below there where it's all kind of scrambly water. He just cast right across 5 different currents, and his fly will just drift like you'd cut it off and dropped it in the river. So their ability to put those flies at distance is probably what differentiates them. For context, when Colorado had the World Championships like 4 years ago, the Americans, pretty strong team, worked their butts off for 2 years. They're all guides there. The Spanish showed up a week before, practiced a little bit. They beat the Americans by 150 fish. So why? They put small flies on the bottom, and the Americans they're well funded. They fish dry flies like at distance. And so one last story so David Archive is amazing. I think Joe's probably seen him once or twice. He's not bad. He had a beat, we would call it frog water, right? You know, that flat water, we'd all walk by and go, crap. So when you're in a competition, you want the faster water. It breaks up your surface. There's usually more fish there, and it's just easier to catch them. Nobody had caught a fish out of this stretch of water in Colorado. So, and he ended up getting 11, I think, 11 or 13 or something. The only fish caught by him, and he caught 13 or something, 11 or 13. So when we asked him how he did it, so picture you have 3 hours to fish a section of river. You end up with this because it's a random draw. You end up with this crappy stretch where you could, so he looked at it and said, well, there's nowhere the fish would be holding. Like they're in here, but it's like a lake. They could be anywhere. There's nowhere, I can't read the water. It's just flat. I have to wait for a fish to show themselves to catch it. So he took his fly in his hand and his 18-foot leader and his dry fly master skills. And he said he stood in the water for 30 minutes. And he just stayed there. And the controller told him, you can fish, right? He's like, I am fishing. So he stood there and a fish rose. He does have this ability, picked it up, one cast, covered it, fish. Puts it in the net, kept standing there. 15 minutes later, another fish rose, covered it, landed it. He said he made 15 casts in 3 hours. So, but the moral of that story, why his Spanish good, that was the most efficient way to catch fish. I couldn't, we'd all go running around there like idiots with dry droppers and bobbers and spooking all the fish. They really put a lot of focus on not spooking fish. And I think if you approach the Grand or the Credit with just a little bit more distance, yes, they're a little more used to people, you'll start to catch a little more fish, a little more of the bigger fish. So when I take people out a lot, I just teach them to nymph a little bit farther away, dry fly a little farther away, and that little bit of extra distance, your catch rate goes up a little more outside of like fast, dirty water and stuff like that. Make sense? That's the Spanish. Yeah, they're pretty good.
Thank you. Awesome.
So I'm gonna tell you just a pheasant tail. I know, like seriously, a pheasant tail. Anybody here not heard of a pheasant tail? Still works. So the forgotten pheasant tail. So this is actually, sound like I'm spending too much time with the Spanish, which I do. This is the way the Spanish tie it, and I love it. And I just show you because it's actually for the, this is where the purists usually like me a bit more. It's a lot more like the old school. Now I've got a monster bead on here for some reason, but we'll just pretend. That's a 3.5 mil bead. So I'll just, again, choose your favorite hook bead combo. I don't go much bigger than that in any way, shape, or form on any fly. So all I've done is attach the bead. This is a size 14. That's a monster bead for that. Grab your favorite pheasant tail. So I just take 3. You know, if you take 4, they won't bite it. It has to be 3. Joking. It has nothing to do with the tail, just like a thin body. So I just take it, pheasant tail, size, length of the body, tie it in. So these are ultra fast. Fold this back. So this is where I get I take, your your Zappa gap, whatever you want to call it. I put a little bit on the hook, on the thread, and a little bit on the body. Sorry about that. I have not done it. A little bit on the body. So I'm really gluing it. You notice I'm not going to put a rib on it at all. I take this, and I wrap it around the thread. So now I've got a pheasant tail piece. Oh, I broke it. It all came apart. Let's do it from scratch. All right. So take my pheasant tail, 3 knot 4. Again, choose as many as you want. I won't do the fancy glue piece. So you just get your thread right, you fold it back, right? Put it on the thread like this. And then you just take the thread with your pheasant tail on it, wrap it up the body, like so, and you are done. So that is the pheasant tails I fish now. So don't waste time with the rib. I had a client who was out he made the trek and drove out to Alberta, and he said this was just ridiculous how well this was working. So #1 fly of the Spanish team, pheasant tail with no rib. Sinks like a stone, fish will eat it anywhere. Impress your friends. It's a little bit like the old one, but the no rib is way better. And it doesn't really come apart when you wrap it on the thread. And if you want to make one variation, there's one called a Frenchie, because a French made it famous. Some people like tie it the exact same way. You can just put a couple variations that are pretty good if you like pheasant tails, which we all should. Take some hot orange dubbing, just a little bit. Don't go overboard here, just a little hot spot. They love this on the Grand, by the way. Put a little hot spot on the back, die off. So I have one with a hot spot, one without. Start with the hot spot. They get sick of it, take it off. If you get into really clear water or you see a lot of mayflies coming off, just off you go. And that fly right there, same fly. I just put a little bit of a hot spot on it.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's my nymphs. That's it. Go fish the Grand, kill it, have fun. Any questions on the nymphs? But you'll see, again, I know one's got a little more movement built in. That'll cover every mayfly there is, and good to go. So I'll show you a couple dries. So the Grand is pretty caddisy. I like to fish a caddis fly. The #1 one I fish is an F fly. If you haven't heard of an F fly, I can't remember the names, Franz something came up with it. It's considered one of the best dry flies in the world. I'm not doing anything here but stealing a great dry fly. The original is just a black thread body with some CDC on the top. I do find adding a little bit of pearl on the Grand makes a big difference. I like a little bit of hot spot on the Grand. Brown trout seem to like that a lot more. If I'm fishing rainbows, I don't tend to do it as much, and I think that's opposite what people think. But they tend to really like this. And remember, brown trout will feed vertically, where rainbows tend to feed more horizontally. So as we all know, once you get brown trout looking up, you can fish a dry fly even though nothing's rising. And if they're conditioned to seeing caddis, you get the size relatively right, they're probably going to come up. Now, I did do a tying seminar like this earlier in the year, and I got reports of guys just killing it on the Grand and the Credit with this fly, so they were quite excited about that. I do find this little tiny tail just makes a difference. All I do is I'm going to wrap about 3-4 wraps of pearl. That's it. Not going for a whole pearl body, just a micro spot, just a little bit of glint. So something to remember on dry flies is just a little bit of a hot spot can work some wonders. There's times when plain fly will work well, but that little glint, I don't even know if you can see that glint. I'll hold it up. It can make a difference. This would be one where, you know, if you're on the Grand, anytime after, you know, late, I don't know, they were late this year, but maybe early June, I started throwing F flies all the time. And if there's fish rising, I usually feel I could catch them if I've got one of these on. So grab your favorite CDC, called de Canard, you know, get your favorite grade. So this is a pretty delicate fly. I don't go overboard. 2 pieces of CDC. I just make it the length of the fibers, and I pull it back. So all I've done is taken it, pulled it back like that. And already, if you're looking up at a trout, doesn't that look like a caddis? Just please eat me. That's it. Just take it. If you really want to get like technical about it, you can take the curvature of the CDC and make sure it kind of goes down. I don't really lose too much sleep over it. Slightly longer than the hook. Keep it pinched. Couple of wraps. There you go. One of the greatest dry flies ever. Real simple. Again, an easy one to change. The body, if you want, different thread colors, stuff like that. Black works pretty good because they see a silhouette when they're coming up. This will sit in the film, but there are times like if you see some electric green one or something, or you can throw dubbing on the body. But if you were looking for just a basic catchfish on the Grand, right, like so, and that's what it looks like from the bottom. I don't know if you can see, there's a little, I don't know, I'll catch that little glint. It should. There's a little bit of a glint on the tail. You can't really see it, but you can see that looks like a caddis, right? When you're on those little black caddis, tie this in a small one. Again, you're not gonna, like, it floats really, really well. Just use that, looks like cocaine powder, whatever they call that stuff, the dry fly. We call it the Bogota Special on the river. But that dry fly, if you don't want to use your gink and stuff like that on CDC, but it'll float all day on that, and that tends to really, really do well. I'll show you an interesting one. So we still get some big mayflies coming off sometimes, hex and stuff like that. If you need a big mayfly, this one is a shout out to Ian James. We came up with this one years ago. Still works today. It's the only pattern I use when I need a big mayfly, so your drakes and stuff like that. So this is where you need your quality of CDC. So I just take 2 feathers like that, right? This is a 1 feather fly. So you take it, peel these 2 back like this. That. I'm going to tie that in with the curvature going down. I'm going to tie that in at the tail, like so. And I know you're gonna look at this fly and think I've lost my mind, which is fair, but I promise you I haven't. So you see this little tail sticking out the back. Take some crappy piece of CDC, pull it off as dubbing. I'm gonna dub the body. Just dub up the body. I'm mainly doing this just for floatability. Keeps this thing floating. So dub the body. Take your 2 that you had here. Pull these feathers. So I'm going to come in this way and pull all that up. It's like tying a humpy. If you know what a humpy is. So you're pulling that forward. So I end up like that. And all I'm going to do is pinch these and pull all those feathers back. So I really just peel the feathers back off the stem, and you end up with a beautiful mayfly pattern. It's like a Comparadun, for those fly attires out there, CDC version mayfly. If you need anything, it doesn't work as well on small mayflies, but if you get into the bigger mayflies on any river, I really have stopped caring about color. The only last thing you do is you take the tail, and I'm going to trim that little spine out. So you end up with a mayfly. One feather, floats beautifully, and if you look at underneath, that's what the fish sees, and it doesn't look great when I do that, but you can see there's a see that mayfly in there? That sucker is awesome. Any questions on that? That's the only one I use, like when there's drakes coming off or anything, I just throw that. Or
One
hikes.
feather,
What's that?
one feather fly.
One feather fly, yeah. Super delicate. They love it. They scarf it. They love this.
What did you name it?
No, CDC Mayfly. We who knows? I guess we can come up with a cool name, but that's a really good fly. The top mayfly, actually the only mayfly the Spanish use. So if you want to know, like if it gets down to pattern complexity, they tie this in hare's ear and red. That's it. Red and hare's ear color. It's the only two patterns they use for mayfly color wise. And this is like we use it all the time. The red one is like an attractor. I don't know why it works. So take like red rabbit or seal's fur. They love red mayflies. There's no red mayflies, but the brown trout sure like them. So these are the two I'd rotate through really, really fast. You guys can tell me if somebody else has tied this one too. So I take, that's fox squirrel. You could take a hare's ear mask, something like that. Pick your favorite tail. I just take, so just a little clump of tail like that. Almost like you're tying a hare's ear, like it's essentially a hare's ear nymph with a wing, which John Garrick's favorite dry fly is a hare's ear dry as well, but his was a parachute, but it was ironic that it was the same almost. So little tail in the, take your favorite mix. Again, I like the hare's ear #1 a lot. Got that in it. Dub, dub, dub. Keep it relatively thin. Leave lots of space. So it's really, I would call this almost like a CDC comparadun. So it's going to look kind of similar to what I did with that other fly that I'm going to call the Jean Petitjean fly now. It's got a name, Brian.
Okay. Do you need a Jean Petitjean vice?
I didn't know he tied that. I'm going to stop loving myself for coming up with that. We just probably subliminally copied him. So take 2 feathers like that. So weirdly, this is the way the Spanish tie it. So I'm going to just show you their way. They take the wing, put it this way, and tie it in like this. So they have it facing that way, right? They take and they clip that piece off. Then they pull this piece forward and tie it out. And it really is more to just anchor the fly. So you can see I've anchored that in there. Now you could just tie it in forward. I'm pretty sure that the whole reason they do that is when you pull it up, you don't just pull it out of the thread, because there's really not a huge, unless you guys are better fly tyers than I am, there's a reason for that. So you can see I've got these 2 CDC fibers sticking out like that. I'm pinching these, I'm going to pull these fibers back. So very similar to the last one. Tie it up. As you can see, they will stand up like that. Clip off your excess. Spanish are very big on splitting the wing, so they actually take the wing, split it, and that is so it lands a lot more flush. So that is it. So peel that up. And so that is the only mayfly I've been using on the Grand for the last 2 years. I used to have all these I give away, ironically just give away all my mayflies all the time. So if you want some, just find me on the river, I'll give you a whole bunch. That one like that. Maybe streamline that a little bit. Yeah, that guy right there. All day. But so pretty fishy, you can see underneath. I don't know, they love it. Anybody seen that one? John Petterjohn do that one too?
Not that I know
That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
that's a real Spanish classic. So why are they good at dry flies? They are really sparse on the wing. You can see they're pretty sparse on everything. That lands really nice. That floats really nice. But you just take your powder, just do that on the wing or use the brush, and don't worry about these long fibers. They like their wings long, like it, because it. I think this will sit a little bit in the film, kind of like that, and they eat it all day.
Is there a name for that one?
Hare's ear dry fly. That's what they call. And they call the other one the red baron. So if they tie that with a red body, it's called the Baron Roho, which I did a Google translation is red baron. So that exact same fly, identical, but red rabbit or red dubbing, like they don't really care, but bright red.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. And that's the two they'll rotate through. And I started doing it, works pretty good. That one specifically, especially when you get into the sulfurs and stuff like that, I mean, you can put lighter dubbing, it really looks like the gray foxes and stuff like that. Like it kills.
Now, Ian Colin James always used to swear on coffee-colored flies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he used to do the scuds with a little bit of coffee in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, and then and I still have some of the dubbing he did, which was like that. Yeah, he liked coffee a lot. And then I didn't do it today, but we really like the coffee bean. You know, when you glue the coffee bean on a hook.
Yeah.
You know that?
No.
So if you take I'm not joking, because I'm not being facetious. So you take a coffee bean, choose your size to fit, to match your hook, and just take epoxy or glue, and then just glue it on top of the hook. And so it matches a beetle beautifully, right? So
is that roasted?
Roasted, of course. Yeah, it has to be roasted, not ground, roasted, of course. They're not durable, so I'm not here to tell you. So I had some people doing with kind of a flex cement, so the hook turns, and that's better. But you can't. It's hard to mimic the and this is where you want to plop it down, and the plop. It's almost the same as a beetle. Like it sounds silly, but it mimics the sound of this is where they hear them hit the water. And you get into some of those flat stretches of the Grand with the overhanging trees. And it used to be down in the low bridge there. When it went down, you could put that into those bushes there and slap it down. They'll eat it all day. It's a good one. So we like that one a lot. But it was coffee colored and it was coffee. So it was really, really good. But he liked coffee colored a lot. And I would say one of his all-time favorites for sure was that dubbed, just the dubbing behind a hook. Like, man, that was money.
And the Crunchy Muncher fly.
The Crunchy Caddis. Crunchy Caddis. He had the Muncher, the Puke Fly, which is still one of the best, by far, steelhead flies you'll find. And then I'll tie out. Okay, now we'll get a little fancy. This is fancy pants stuff for me. So this fly is called the Championship Caddis. Not that we won the championship with it. It won a competition at the World Championships in somewhere, who cares? But every team that finished in the top 10 was using a variation of this fly. And so it's very popular in England. They call it the Championship Caddis. It works, they would say, a treat or over here as well. I would call this much more of a prospecting dry fly. So I like dries this year was crap for that, but normally once you get into the fish are looking up and they're conditioned to seeing caddis, I like a big caddis, like maybe a 12. When I say big, like a 12. I like this fly a lot to just fish it like a streamer. I'll go through the water first with this a lot of times because two things: you don't spook the fish, especially if you can fish at distance, and they'll come up for it. Stimulators are also good, really big stimulators. Don't be afraid to fish big caddis patterns while everybody's fishing micro stuff. Go the opposite. We are not looking to match a hatch or anything like that. We are looking, they've seen these big caddis, they've come in the water, they'll hit it. You can also, dangle this fly and twitch it if you want. Do both with it, like fish it dead drift wiggle it, move it, see if you can get a reaction straight. You know, commit to trying it. You'll be amazed at how well it works. It's much more of an attractor dry, but it is a standard in any, I would say, competition person's dry fly box, but it's also becoming quite a standard for just your everyday anglers because it's a very, very good pattern. So I use Glow Bright number 7 like that. But see, that's the color. This was the one I used on the other one. It's really bright. This one's just a lighter orange. So this would be the exact color of steelhead orange for all you glow brug, you know, chucker, steelhead fishermen out there. We all know steelhead orange. That's the color. Just a bit of a lighter orange. It's just trying to be not, I mean, I have no evidence beyond this was the same when used at that same pattern. I like it a little bit lighter orange at the top. When I'm fishing this one from before, you know, with that's down on the bottom, lower light. It's not up at the top. You know, I think it's a light thing myself. I'd rather the bright stuff when I'm having it on the bottom. When I get into the top of the water column, I like a little bit of the lighter orange. So I'm just catching it in. It's exactly the same as before. I rolled the thread back and forth. You could use whatever you want to make a little orange tail. A lot of guys on the Czech team are using, what do you call it, like a tinsel, stuff like that, like almost like a flashaboo, anything orange. Again, don't go overboard on the tail, but a little bit longer on this one. So it's got a little bit of an orange hot spot. This one's very involved. It's going to take me a while here. All right, so take some CDC, dub the body. Oh, already bored. Okay, all right, so dubbed body. See earlier F fly approach. So F fly wing this sucker. It's a caddis. Take your 2. If you really don't like this is pretty high grade. If you have low grade, go 3. Take your feathers like this, and I'm just gonna pull them back like that, so I end up with a wing. Like so. I put it right to the end of the orange. And you notice I've kept myself some room here. That's on purpose. So don't crowd the head on this one. Go a little bit further back. So it kind of looks like crap right now because I've kind of tied a F-fly with an overdone head on it. And again, I don't tie this in small. Like if I'm tying small, I tie that pearl butt one. So you can see, looks like a caddis. Got a little hot spot underneath. We'll show you after. Then the Spanish guys, they split the thread. So if you guys are into splitting thread and putting in, and they'll spin and make it look beautiful, that's way too involved for me. And I mean, I argue with them because this is the exact same result. I just take this. I take a couple long fibers from one side, right? Peel them back, and they end up with this thing. So I just clip that off. But I've kept them purposefully long. So you take a little bit of wax, don't go overboard with the wax, but I want it to stick a little bit. Really loosely dub. So I'm not trying to do a rope, I'm just loosely dubbing and make a little bit of a head there. Then pull it back. So it almost looks like a little muddler head on it, and then tie it off. And so this gives it a little bit of floatability, but what I like how it does on the footprint, especially for a search pattern, we've gone really, really aggressive on, you know, come and eat me. So we got a little bit of a hot spot, and then you brush it out, you end up with this buggy caddis thing. It looks like that. And then I turn it this way, get a little, see that little hot spot in there?
Yep.
And then you get a little bit of this leg, fly-by leg thingy going on.
Oh.
That is money. That's the dry flies I use on the Grand. That's it.
So you don't use any antron in the tails?
What's that?
You don't use any antron at all?
No, on the body. A lot of times, like you know, but antron on the tail is really good. You know, if you like, Ian liked to put on his F fly, he would put a layer of antron over, and then put the wing over. That works really good. A little Antron sticking out, really, really good. I don't as much anymore. Not that it doesn't work. It's good. But I've just really simplified it on that. But there's nothing wrong with an Antron kind of shuck or whatever you want to call it up the back. But I do, you can see I like that. I throw my Antron wherever I can in the dubbing. That's what I do. But it's in there. It's just I'm using it differently.